Garrett Finch scrutinized the suspension of the old Chevy and shook his head. The car was in need of serious repairs, and the owner had obviously hoped to get away with it. Wiping his hands on the rags, he glanced at his watch. It was 15 to 6. It was the end of the day at Tom's Auto Body Shop. "Hey, Garrett, you'll be done tomorrow." Ray, a stocky, bearded man with tattoos on both arms, clapped him on the shoulder. "There's soccer tonight, remember? Myers versus the Bulldogs." "I remember." Garrett nodded, closing the hood. "But I'm not sure I can make it. Alice said she wanted to talk about something important today." "Oh, girl talk," Ray grinned. "I bet it's about the bathroom remodeling again, isn't it? My Sheila's been on my ass for 2 months." "Who knows?" Garrett shrugged, though he felt a nasty tingle in his stomach. Alice had been acting strange for the past 2 weeks, often hovering over the phone with a nervous smile, answering inappropriately, staying late at work. It was a red flag, but Garrett shook off his suspicions. 15 years of marriage was no joke. They had 2 kids, a mortgage, and mutual friends. He changed quickly in the locker room, washed the machine oil off his hands, said goodbye to his co-workers, and walked out into the evening street. Riverdale greeted him with soft September air and an orange sunset. A town like a town. 35,000 residents, 3 supermarkets, a couple of shopping centers, and 1 high school where their children, 13-year-old Lily and 11-year-old Connor, attended. She and Alice had grown up here themselves, had been in parallel grades, and had started dating at graduation. Then there was community college, a 3rd-year wedding, their first child, and the decision to stay in their hometown. Garrett got a job as a mechanic. He liked the work and it paid well. Alice finished accounting courses and worked for a local insurance company. Life flowed smoothly. A vacation once a year, barbecues on weekends, school meetings, trips to the movies. A normal middle-class American family. It took Garrett 15 minutes to get home. Their 2-story house on Clarence Avenue was typical of the neighborhood. A neat little yard, a 2-car garage, a white wooden fence in need of painting. They'd bought it 10 years ago with a 30-year mortgage, 20 more to pay off. "I'm home," he shouted, coming into the hallway. "Hi, Dad," Connor whizzed past with a tablet in his hands. "Mom said we were ordering pizza. Where's Lily?" Emma's having a sleepover. They're doing some project over there." Garrett nodded. The older daughter had been spending more and more time at her friend's house lately. No surprise adolescence. Secrets. In the kitchen, Alice was going through her mail. She was still an attractive woman in her 37, dark blonde hair just below her shoulders, green eyes, a slender figure. The years had left little trace on her face, only the fine lines in the corners of her eyes showing age. "How was your day?" Garrett asked, opening the refrigerator. "Fine." Alice smiled, but it was strained. "The office is a mess because of the new reporting system." "You?" "The usual. Mike Thornton's got his wreck again. He's asking me to fix something that should be scrapped for a penny." The conversation wasn't going well. Garrett could feel the tension between them, almost palpable, thick as fog. Alice avoided his gaze, kept fidgeting with the bracelet on her wrist, a 10th anniversary present. "Pizza will be here in 40 minutes, she finally said. Connor wanted it with extra cheese. "Great." Garrett pulled a beer out of the fridge. "I'm gonna go change." In the bedroom, he just sat on the edge of the bed for a while, looking at the family photos on the dresser. Here were he and Alice on the shores of Lake Erie, young, tanned, happy. Here were the kids at Disneyland 3 years ago. Ordinary snapshots of an ordinary happy family. Or are they? When he got back to the living room, Connor was already in front of the TV, immersed in some kind of game. "Did you do your assignment for tomorrow?" Garrett asked. "Yeah," his son said without looking up from the screen. "I lied." "Yes, I did. Mom, tell him." Alice came out of the kitchen with a glass of wine. "He's done math, but he's not done with history yet." I'll do it after dinner, I promise. Connor looked at his father pleadingly. Okay, you have my word, Garrett sighed. The pizza arrived on time. They sat down at the dining room table and Garrett noticed that Alice wasn't eating much, just picking at a piece with her fork. Was there something wrong with the pizza? He asked. No, I'm just not very hungry. She took a sip of wine. Connor, don't rush it, you'll choke on it. Can I finish it in my room? The match starts in 5 minutes. Alice and Garrett looked at each other. Don't sprinkle it on the bed, Alice said, and Connor grabbed 2 slices of pizza and ran upstairs. It was just the two of them. The wall clock ticked, a wedding present from Alice's parents. The windows were lit in the house across the street. The Barton family was probably having dinner too, discussing the day's events. It was the same as it had always been. And it wasn't the same. You wanted to talk, Garrett said, pushing his plate away. Alice flinched as if she'd been taken by surprise. Yes, but maybe not tonight. I'm tired. And Alice, he looked her straight in the eye. What's going on? You haven't been yourself the last few weeks. You've been on the phone. You've been late. I'm not blind. She looked away, biting her lip. Her fingers started fiddling with her bracelet again. Garrett, Is there someone else? The question came out of his mouth, though he hadn't intended it to be so direct. Alice flinched as if struck by a blow. Her face paled and there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. That was more eloquent than any answer. Why did you, she began, but stopped short when she saw the look on his face. Garrett, it's not what you think. What am I supposed to think? His voice remained remarkably calm, though his insides were shaking. Just answer yes or no. Alice lowered her eyes. Her shoulders slumped as if air had been sucked out of them. Yes, she said faintly. But it didn't mean anything. Garrett felt the room around him begin to spin. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, thousands of days and nights together, and just like that, a simple yes. Who is he? Garrett asked, surprised at how steady his voice sounded. Fletcher Montgomery. He works in our finance department, transferred from the Cleveland branch 6 months ago. Fletcher. Even the name sounded pretentious. Garrett envisioned a well-built office worker in an expensive suit, with a fashionable haircut and a white-toothed smile. How long has this been going on? 3 months, Alice answered quietly. Garrett, look, it was just about sex. Nothing serious, no love, just a moment of weakness. A moment of weakness 3 months long? He felt a wave of anger rising inside of him. You met in our house, in our bed? No, never. Alice looked up fearfully. It was usually in his apartment, sometimes in a motel outside of town. Each word hit like a hammer. Motel, apartment, his wife, the mother of his children, lying in bed with another man, laughing with him, undressing in front of him. Do the children know? He asked, feeling his lips go numb. Of course not. Tears glistened in her eyes. Garrett, I was going to stop it. You already have. The last time was 2 weeks ago. I realized it was a mistake, that I was risking everything we had. Papi, 2 weeks ago, he repeated in a colorless voice. So if I hadn't asked you today, you wouldn't have said anything? Alice didn't answer, and that was more eloquent than any words could say. Why? He asked at last. What were you missing? I don't know. She shook her head. Attention, maybe. The thrill? We've been living like neighbors for the last few years. Work, kids, home. When was the last time we had a heart-to-heart? When was the last time we had real sex, not 5 minutes before bed? Garrett looked at the woman across from him and didn't recognize her. Who was this Alice, talking about real sex with someone else? So it's my fault? He grinned bitterly. Not paying enough attention, not taking her to restaurants, didn't shower her with compliments? No, Garrett, she shook her head. I don't blame you. I do. It was my weakness, my stupidity. I didn't mean to hurt you. But I did. Upstairs, Connor shouted joyously. Apparently his team had scored a goal, a sound from another world, from a life that had just been shattered. What now? Alice asked, looking at him with hope and fear. Garrett, I love you. I want to keep our family together. It was a mistake, and I swear. I can't discuss this right now. He stood up from the table. I need to think about it. And I can't look at you right now. Garrett, please. Alice reached for him, but he pulled away. You will sleep in the guest room, he said quietly but firmly. And we won't talk about this in front of the children. At least not yet. He walked out of the kitchen, feeling a cold emptiness growing inside. Scraps of thoughts swirled in his head. How long ago he'd suspected something, whether there were other signs he'd ignored, and what the hell he was going to do next. Garrett went up to the second floor, past his son's room, from behind the door of which came the excited commentators of a soccer game, and locked himself in the bathroom. Only there, turning the water on full blast to drown out the sound, did he allow himself to cry. The morning began with silence. Garrett woke at 6:30, reaching for the other side of the bed out of habit. Empty. The events of last night weighed heavily on him. Alice and some Fletcher. 3 months of deception. A motel outside of town. He got up and mechanically went to the shower. The hot water didn't wash away the heaviness in his chest. The mirror reflected a gaunt face with red eyes. The sleepless night had left marks that couldn't be hidden behind the usual stubble. In the kitchen, Garrett found Alice already dressed for work. She was stirring her coffee, staring into the void. When she saw her husband, she flinched. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Coffee? I'll make it myself," he said, trying not to look her in the eye. "Garrett, we need to talk. I've been thinking all night." "Not now." He opened the refrigerator, pretending to look for something. "I'm late for work." "It's Saturday," Alice reminded him quietly. Garrett froze. It was Saturday. He could have slept longer, but his body was used to waking up at the same time. "I promised Ray I'd help him with the car," he lied, slamming the refrigerator door shut. "I'll be late." It was cowardly, and he realized it. But all he wanted to do now was run away from home, not to see his wife's face, not to hear her excuses. "What about the children?" Alice sounded worried. "Connor wanted you to help him with his bike." "I'll fix it tonight," Garrett said, pouring coffee into a mug. "Did you move the stuff into the guest room?" Alice nodded, biting her lip. "How long is this going to take?" she asked. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Not until I figure out what to do next." "Garrett, please give me a chance to explain." "What exactly are you going to explain?" He finally looked at her, and Alice stepped back under the weight of his gaze. "How you spread your legs in front of Fletcher, or how you lied to me for 3 months looking me in the eye. It wasn't like that. How was it?" He felt the rage boiling up inside him. "Just sex, huh? You had your fun and that's it? You think I should just accept it and move on?" A sleepy Connor in superhero pajamas appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Why are you yelling?" he muttered, rubbing his eyes. Garrett and Alice exchanged quick glances. "Just adult conversation, buddy," Garrett tried to smile. "It's okay. Do you want pancakes for breakfast? Can I have chocolate chip?" "Sure," Alice smiled. "Sit down. I'll make some." Garrett took the moment to slip away. Grabbing his coffee, he walked out of the house and got into the car. There was no Ray in his problems, just an excuse. He spent the afternoon mindlessly driving around town, then parked by the lake and sat staring at the water surface for a long time. Scraps of thoughts and memories swirled in his head. Here was Alice in her white dress walking toward him down the aisle of Riverdale's little church. Here she is, holding newborn Lily in her arms. Here they are celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary at that little restaurant on the shore. And now it all seemed like a lie, a stage set that hid the real Alice, the one capable of betrayal. Garrett didn't get home until evening. Lily was already home, sitting on the porch with her cell phone in her hands. "Hi, Dad." She looked up. 13 years old, almost a teenager, but still his little girl. "Where have you been?" Mom was worried. "Things have been busy." He kissed the top of her head. "How's the project with Emma?" "It's fine," Lily shrugged. "We're almost done. Only Mr. Baker is picky about the decorating." They entered the house together. In the kitchen, Alice was cooking dinner and Connor was sitting at the table assembling some kind of construction project. "Look, Dad," exclaimed the boy. "It's a Mars rover. Can you imagine? It can even drive on sand?" "Impressive," Garrett nodded, though it was hard for him to concentrate on anything. Dinner passed in tense silence. The children sensed something was wrong, but for now they blamed the silence on their parents' fatigue. After eating, Alice sent them upstairs, Lily to finish a project, Connor to get ready for bed. "I need to get something from the bedroom," she said when it was just the two of them. "A few more things." "Take what you need." Garrett sank into the chair in front of the television and turned on some sports program, though he didn't really see what was happening on the screen. Alice went upstairs quietly. She returned 20 minutes later with a small stack of clothes and toiletries. "I told Lily that my back hurts," she said, stopping in the living room doorway. "So I'll be sleeping in the guest room for a while." "Good excuse," Garrett nodded, keeping his eyes on the screen. "It can't last, Garrett. Kids aren't stupid, they'll notice." "What do you suggest?" He finally turned to her. "Pretend it didn't happen? Or tell them the truth, that their mother had been fucking a co-worker for 3 months?" "Don't say that." Tears glistened in Alice's eyes. "Yes, it was my fault. Yes, I betrayed you. But we can try to make it right. For the kids, for 15 years together." "I don't know, Alice." He shook his head. "I look at you now and I see a stranger." She left, crying silently. Garrett stayed in the living room, mindlessly changing channels. When he finally went upstairs, the house was plunged into silence. A nightlight was burning in Lily's room. The girl was already asleep. Connor was also on his 10th nap, cuddling a stuffed dinosaur, a gift from last Christmas. The door to the guest room was tightly closed. Garrett lay down in their shared bed, which now seemed too big and cold. He closed his eyes and tried to fall asleep, but images came to his mind. Alice with another man. They were laughing, undressing, touching each other. He opened his eyes abruptly, pushing the images away. It was going to be a long night. The next 5 days became an agonizing pretense. At work, Garrett acted on autopilot, making mistakes he'd never made before. Ray tried a couple times to find out what was going on with him, but ran into a wall of silence. At home, it was even worse. He and Alice only talked about household trivia in front of the kids, carefully avoiding being alone together. Lily and Connor noticed the change, how Mom and Dad no longer hugged, no longer joked, barely looked at each other. The official version about Alice's bad back was becoming less and less convincing. Wednesday night, when Garrett came home from work, Lily caught him in the hallway. "What's going on, Dad?" she asked bluntly. "Are you and Mom fighting?" "Why would you say that?" He tried to feign surprise. "I'm not a little girl." Lily crossed her arms over her chest. "You barely talk to each other. Mommy cries at night. I can hear through the wall, and no one's back hurts for that long." Garrett sighed. His daughter had always been perceptive beyond her years. "Mom and I are going through a rough patch right now," he said carefully. "But we both love you and Connor more than anything in the world. That's not going to change." "You're getting a divorce?" Lily's eyes flashed with fear. "No," Garrett lied, though that was what he'd been thinking about for the last few days. "We just need some time to work things out." Lily wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face into his chest. "Please don't get divorced," she whispered. "Emma's parents divorced last year, and now she's living with her mom and dad. It's really hard on her." Garrett stroked his daughter's hair, feeling his heart clench. He couldn't promise something he wasn't sure of. Friday afternoon, Alice sent a text. "Connor and I are going to Grandma's today. We'll be back by 8. I want to make a special dinner, just you and me. We need to talk." Garrett stared at the phone screen for a long moment. Part of him wanted to refuse, to run away, to not give Alice even a chance to reconcile. But the other part, the part that remembered their 15 years together, was eager to find a way out of this nightmare. He got home at 7. The house was filled with the aromas of food cooking. Alice was in the kitchen with candles and a bottle of wine on the table, the same semi-sweet red they'd drunk on their first date. "Hi," she smiled nervously. "I thought we needed a night out for 2. Lily's at Emma's and Connor's staying the night at my mom's." Garrett nodded, not knowing what to say. Alice looked touchingly beautiful in her blue dress, the one he'd given her for her birthday 2 years ago. Her hair was styled in waves, her light makeup emphasizing her green eyes. "I made steaks," she continued, fussing over the stove. "And that potato gratin you like. 20 more minutes and it'll be ready." "Good." He strode into the living room, feeling the tension building inside. What was she trying to accomplish with this? Did she really think one candlelit dinner could erase betrayal? He sat back in his chair, going over in his head the dozens of questions he wanted to ask. Dinner was impeccably served. Alice always knew how to create an atmosphere. Perfectly grilled steaks, gratin, fresh salad. The wine shimmered softly in the glasses. "Garrett," Alice began as they sat down at the table, "I know I can't just apologize and expect things to go back to the way they were. But I want you to know that no one is more important to me than you and the children. What happened? It was a terrible mistake. I'm not looking for excuses." Garrett was silent, staring at his plate. The fork in his hand trembled. "I cut all ties with Fletcher," Alice continued. "I've applied for a transfer to another department. It hurts to see me destroy what we've spent 15 years building. But if you gave me a chance—" "What was it?" Garrett interrupted her. "What?" Alice blinked incomprehensibly. "Fletcher. What was he like? Tall, handsome, rich. What is it about him that you would risk our family for?" "Garrett, please don't—" "No, I want to know." He felt the anger boiling up inside him. "I have a right to know who made you forget about your husband and children." "No one forced me," Alice said quietly. "It was my choice, my weakness. Fletcher, he just happened to be there when I felt invisible." "Invisible?" Garrett grinned bitterly. "What nonsense! You had everything a loving husband, beautiful children, a home. What were you missing?" "Attention," Alice said almost in a whisper. "Passion. The feeling that I was a woman, not just a mother and a wife." Garrett jumped up, knocking over his glass. The wine spilled over the white tablecloth in a scarlet stain. "Is that why you spread your legs for the first man you met?" "Don't say that." Alice's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Garrett, I know you're angry." But he wasn't listening. The blood was pulsing in his head and his ears were ringing. The anger that had been building up for days was rushing out in an uncontrollable torrent. Garrett grabbed the steak plate and threw it to the floor. The porcelain shattered. Food splattered across the kitchen floor. "Garrett!" Alice shrieked. But he'd already reached the skillet with the remaining steaks and tipped it into the sink, turning the water on full blast. "What are you doing?" Alice rushed toward him, trying to stop him. "Showing you what I think of your special dinner." He gritted through his teeth, grabbing the bowl of salad and shoveling its contents into the trash. "You thought you'd feed me and I'd forgive everything? That we'd make love and I'd forget you fucked another man? Stop it!" Alice sounded really scared. She'd never seen her husband like this before, even in their most violent arguments. Garrett had always remained restrained, had never descended into rudeness or violence. He stopped, breathing heavily in the middle of the trashed kitchen. He looked at his wife's frightened face, at the trembling hand she was covering herself with as if expecting a blow. What was he doing? What has he become? "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to. I just can't." Garrett turned and ran out of the house, leaving Alice alone among the broken plates and ruined food. He got into his car and drove around the night streets of Riverdale for a long time, trying to calm himself down. Eventually, he parked outside an all-night bar on the outskirts of town. It wasn't crowded inside. A couple of regulars at the bar, a bunch of young people at the pool table. "Whiskey," he said to the bartender. "A double." The alcohol burned his throat but brought no relief. Alice's frightened face was still in front of his eyes. What was happening to him? He'd never been prone to outbursts of rage, always prided himself on his self-control. And now? Trashing his own kitchen like an unstable teenager. But the worst part wasn't the angry outbursts, it was the intrusive images. Day and night, at work and at home, he was haunted by images of Alice with another man. Every time he looked at his wife, he pictured her in Fletcher's arms, her laughter, her moans, her pleasure, how she would kiss the other, how she would touch him, how she would take him inside her. These thoughts were driving him crazy, poisoning every waking moment. "One more," he nodded to the bartender, emptying his glass. In his pocket, his phone vibrated. A message from Alice. "Where are you? I'm worried. Please come home. We can just talk." Garrett set the phone aside without answering. He wasn't ready to go back, wasn't ready to see her again, to imagine her with someone else again. How could they ever move on with their lives if every glimpse of his wife caused such pain? By midnight, though, he did get home. The kitchen was cleaned, not a trace of broken dishes or spoiled food. The house was steeped in silence. Going upstairs, Garrett saw a light under the guest room door. He knocked softly. "Yes?" Alice's voice sounded hoarse, as if she had been crying for a long time. Garrett opened the door. Alice was sitting on the edge of the bed with her arms around her knees. Her eyes were red and puffy. "I'm sorry about the kitchen," he said. "I shouldn't have reacted like that." "It's okay," she smiled weakly. "I deserved it." "No," he shook his head. "You can't do that. I don't want to be that person." Alice nodded, looking down at the floor. "What are we going to do, Garrett?" she asked quietly. "How are we going to live our lives?" "I don't know," he answered honestly. "All I feel right now is pain. Every time I look at you, I see him." "I'm so sorry," Alice whispered. "Me too," he retreated to the door. "Good night." "Good night," she echoed. Garrett closed the door and went into their bedroom. He lay down on top of the blanket without undressing. The gap between them grew wider every day, and he couldn't see a bridge to connect the shattered shores of their lives. The therapist's waiting room was decorated in soothing green colors, soft chairs, dimmed lights, nature sounds from a small speaker in the corner. Garrett sat nervously tapping his fingers on the armrest and glanced at Alice. She looked just as tense, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor. It had been 2 weeks since that fateful evening. 2 weeks of cold war, of awkward breakfasts and dinners, of trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy in front of the kids. Last Sunday, after a particularly agonizing family dinner, when Connor had asked why they no longer laughed together, Alice had suggested seeing a specialist. "We can't go on like this," she said in the evening after the children had gone to bed. "It's not only destroying us, it's destroying them." Garrett agreed, though he doubted that talking to a stranger would help heal such a deep wound. "Mr. and Mrs. Finch?" The office door opened and a woman in her 50s with short graying hair and attentive brown eyes appeared on the doorstep. "I'm Dr. Bernstein. Come in, please." They followed her in silence. The office was spacious, with a comfortable couch for the couple and a separate chair for the therapist. There were diplomas and abstract paintings on the walls, and a carafe of water and glasses on a table. "So," Dr. Bernstein sat down across from them, placing a notebook on her lap. "Let's start with what brought you here." Garrett and Alice looked at each other. Who would be the first to say it out loud? "I was having an affair," Alice said quietly, looking down at the floor, "with a co-worker. 3 months. Garrett found out 2 weeks ago." "I understand," the therapist nodded. "It's certainly a serious crisis for a relationship. Garrett, how are you feeling right now?" He swallowed the lump in his throat. What is he feeling? How could he explain this mixture of pain, rage, humiliation, and despair? "Betrayal," he finally said. It was as if someone had knocked the ground out from under his feet. 15 years together, 2 kids, and now I don't even know who she is. "But you're both here," Dr. Bernstein said. "So there's something worth fighting for." "The children," Garrett answered quickly. "Lily and Connor shouldn't have to suffer for this." Alice turned to him, a glint of pain in her eyes. "Just the children?" she asked quietly. "What else?" He grinned bitterly. "You've ruined everything else." "I understand your pain, Garrett," the therapist intervened. "But it's important to remember that relationships are complex systems. Infidelity rarely happens in perfectly happy marriages." "So you're saying it's my fault?" Garrett felt anger boiling up inside. "No," Dr. Bernstein shook her head. "The responsibility for the betrayal lies with the one who committed it. But to move forward, it's important to understand the root of the problem." "Alice, what do you think led to this situation?" Alice took a deep breath, nervously tugging at the sleeve of her blouse. "I felt invisible," she said. "The last few years our lives had become routine. Home, work, kids. We stopped really talking, stopped noticing each other. Fletcher. He saw me as a woman, not just a wife and mother." Garrett rolled his eyes. "That sounds like an excuse," he said. "It's not an excuse," Alice shook her head. "It's an attempt to explain. I know what I did was awful. I betrayed your trust and destroyed our family. But I want you to understand that it wasn't for lack of love for you." "Love?" Garrett grinned bitterly. "If it's love, I don't want to know it." "Let's go back a little," Dr. Bernstein suggested. "What was your relationship like before the affair? When did the problem start?" "We didn't have problems," Garrett said stubbornly. "Did we?" Alice asked quietly. "When was the last time we spent time together? When did we talk about anything other than bills and the kids' school problems?" Garrett wondered. They really hadn't gotten out anywhere without the kids in a long time. The conversations had mostly revolved around household chores and everyday life. "All families are like that," he said. "It's normal. It's common, but it's not necessarily healthy," the therapist noted. "Relationships need constant attention and care, like a plant. Without them, it withers." "Is that a reason to look for another gardener?" Garrett sneered. "No," the therapist shook her head. "But it is a reason to think about what you can both do differently if you decide to save your marriage." The session went on for another hour. They talked about routine, about unfulfilled expectations, about unvoiced needs. Alice cried, telling how she felt trapped in a vicious cycle, how she was losing herself in the roles of wife and mother. Garrett admitted that he too was tired of the monotony, but never thought it could lead to this. By the end of the session, Dr. Bernstein suggested a few exercises for them: daily heart-to-heart talks without distractions, a list of what each valued in the other, planning time together without children. "And another thing," she added, "you might want to change your environment for a while. Get out of your familiar surroundings where there are too many reminders of the problem." When they left the office, it was already dark outside. They got into the car in silence. Garrett turned on the ignition but was in no hurry to start the car. "Do you think this will help?" he finally asked. "I don't know," Alice said honestly, "but I'm willing to give it a try. Are you?" Garrett looked at her, tired, tear-stained eyes, but still beautiful. The woman he'd loved half his life. The woman who had broken his heart. "Me too," he said quietly. "For the sake of the children, and maybe for us." They drove home in silence, but it was no longer the hostile silence of the last few weeks, but rather a thoughtful pause. The next day at breakfast, Alice suggested something unexpected. "Remember that cabin in the mountains where we were 5 years ago? I found out. It's free this weekend." Garrett remembered the small, cozy cottage an hour's drive from Riverdale, in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. They'd spent a wonderful week there when Connor was 6. What about the kids? Lily could stay at Emma's, and Connor's mom had been calling for a weekend away for a long time, Garrett wondered. A weekend alone together seemed like a step too fast. At home, on the other hand, they were always stuck in the same conversations and accusations. "All right," he decided. "Let's give it a try." Friday after work, they dropped the kids off. Lily at a friend's house, Connor at his grandmother's, and headed for the mountains. The road looped between hills covered in fall forest. The purple and gold of the foliage shone in the setting sun. They hardly spoke, each immersed in his own thoughts. The speakers were playing old tunes from the 80s, the songs of their youth. The house was just as they remembered it, wooden with a veranda surrounded by pine trees. Inside, it smelled of pine needles and smoke from the fireplace. 2 bedrooms, a living room with large windows overlooking the mountain lake, a small but cozy kitchen. "I'll take the small bedroom," Alice said, bringing in the bags. Garrett nodded, though part of him hoped she would suggest otherwise. But the moment for such a move had not yet come. They spent the evening preparing dinner. They cooked together just as they had in the early years of their marriage, when they hadn't had children yet. Garrett grilled the steaks. Alice made the salad. For a while, it seemed like things might go back to normal. Over dinner, with a glass of wine, they finally started talking. "Remember when we dreamed of opening our own auto shop?" Alice asked. "You'd work on the cars and I'd do the bookkeeping." "I remember," Garrett nodded. "But then Lily came along and we couldn't dream. We gave up on our plans too quickly," Alice said thoughtfully. "Traveling, adventure, settled down, stuck in the routine. That's how millions of families live," Garrett shrugged. "It's normal. Normal doesn't always mean right." Alice twirled her glass in her hand. "I think we've lost ourselves in this normalcy, forgotten who we were, what we wanted." "And that's why you decided to find yourself in bed with someone else?" Alice shuddered as if struck by a blow. "No, Garrett. It was a mistake, a weakness. I'm not looking for excuses. I'm just trying to understand how we got to this point." Garrett sipped his wine, staring at the fire in the fireplace. Maybe she was right about something. They really had been living on autopilot the last few years. Work, home, children, sleep, and back again. Lost interest in each other. Forgot what it meant to be a couple, not just parents. "Tell me about him," he asked suddenly. "What?" Alice looked at him in surprise. "About Fletcher. Tell me what he was like. What attracted you to him?" "Garrett, don't. It'll only hurt more." "I need to know," he insisted. "If we were going to move on, I needed to know the truth." Alice was silent for a long time, gathering her thoughts. "He traveled a lot," she began quietly. "He talked about the countries he'd been to. Listened to me, really listened when I talked about my dreams, my fears. Noticing details, a new hairstyle, earrings. He complimented me, made me feel desirable. Every word hit Garrett like a hammer. Images filled his mind again. Alice and this stranger, handsome, educated, attentive. Not at all like a simple mechanic from Riverdale. "And in bed?" he asked, knowing it was masochistic but unable to stop himself. Was he better than me? Garrett, please. Tears glistened in Alice's eyes. It doesn't matter. It wasn't you. That's what matters. It wasn't you. And I will never forgive myself for that. He turned away, feeling a lump come up in his throat. Maybe Dr. Bernstein was right. They needed to get to the bottom of the issues that had led to the affair. But how could he move past that pain? How can he forget that his wife shared his bed with another man? I'm going for a walk, he said, getting up from the table. Garrett, Alice reached for him. I need to clear my head. I'll be right back. He walked out into the cool fall evening. The forest greeted him with the rustle of leaves and the smell of fresh earth. Garrett walked down the path that led to the lake and tried to sort through his feelings. Part of him wanted to forgive Alice, to go back to his old life. The other part of him screamed that some things couldn't be undone, that trust, once broken, could never be rebuilt. The lake spread out in front of him darkly, reflecting the stars. He sat down on a fallen tree near the shore and stared at the water for a long time. 15 years together. So many memories, so many experiences. Was it worth crossing it all off because of 3 months of madness? It was past midnight when Garrett returned to the cabin. Alice was sitting on the couch in front of the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket. I thought you weren't coming back, she said quietly. I wouldn't have left you alone in the woods. She smiled weakly. Remember our first camping trip, in college? You promised to protect me from wild animals. Yes, he smiled back. And then I was scared of a raccoon. It was a very scary raccoon. Alice nodded seriously, and they both laughed. For a moment it felt lighter, as if the cloud had lifted. They sat side by side, staring at the fire, and the silence between them didn't seem heavy for the first time in a long time. I want to try, Garrett, Alice said quietly, to try to save us. But I'll understand if you can't forgive me. He looked at her, the woman he'd loved as a teenager, the woman he'd built a life with, raised his children with, the woman who had betrayed him. I don't know if I can, he answered honestly, but I want to try. For Lily and Connor's sake, for 15 years that shouldn't be thrown away. And for me, because no matter what, I still love you. Alice cried quietly. No sobs. Just tears rolling down her cheeks, reflecting the light of the flames. She didn't try to wipe them away, didn't try to hide them. Garrett gently took her hand in his, the first physical contact in many days. Just held it. Nothing more. In the morning they had breakfast on the veranda. The day promised to be warm and sunny. Indian summer was in full swing. After breakfast they went for a walk around the lake, talking about the children, about work, about future plans, carefully, avoiding sharp edges. After lunch, Alice suggested a boat ride, and they spent a couple of hours on the water, admiring the fall scenery. In the evening, when they returned to the cabin, something had changed. The tension that had eased a little during the day returned with renewed vigor. Garrett caught himself involuntarily imagining Alice with Fletcher, their bodies entwined in passion. The images haunted him, giving him no rest. What are you thinking about? Alice asked, noticing his distant gaze. Nothing, he lied, looking away. Garrett, she stepped closer, touching his shoulder. We agreed to be honest. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress a surge of anger. I think about you and him, he admitted. I can't stop picturing you together. It's like a pain in my brain. Alice dropped her hand, took a step back. I'm sorry, she said. I'd give anything to turn back time. But you can't, Garrett shook his head. No one can. We can only live with the consequences. And how do we live with them? She asked quietly. I don't want to lose you, our family, but I see how much pain you're in, and I realize that you may never be able to forget it, Garrett wondered. Would he ever be able to forget? Would he ever be able to fully trust this woman again? I don't know, he answered honestly. I want things to go back to the way they were. But I'm not sure that's possible. What if it isn't? Alice looked into his eyes. What if there's something new? Maybe we don't need to go back. Maybe we need to move forward, build something different. What do you mean by that? I don't know, she shook her head. Just thinking out loud. We've changed over the years. I've changed. Maybe it's time to recognize that and decide if we want to be together as we are now, with all our faults and mistakes. Garrett thought for a moment. There was truth in Alice's words. They really weren't the 20-year-olds who had once vowed to love each other forever. Life changes people, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. I need time, he said. I can't decide this over the weekend. Of course, Alice nodded. We have time. But was there any truth to it? Garrett wasn't sure. The crack in their relationship was getting deeper, and he didn't know if it could be patched. On Sunday, they packed their bags and headed home. The trip wasn't the miraculous healing they had both secretly hoped for, but something had changed. They could talk again without breaking down into screaming. They could be near each other without feeling sharp pain at every glance. Halfway home, Alice suddenly said, "You know, no matter what happens, I'm grateful to you for these 15 years, for Lily and Connor, for all the good things we had." Garrett could hear the goodbye in her words, and it scared him more than he'd expected. "Don't talk like it's over," he said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "I just want you to know. Whatever you decide, I'll understand." They spent the rest of the drive in silence. The house greeted them with the usual silence. The kids wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Alice went to unpack, and Garrett stayed on the porch, looking at the fallen leaves in their small yard. Fall was a time of change, of fading, of preparing for the long winter. He didn't know if spring awaited them or if this cold would stay forever. After their trip to the mountains, they spent another month trying to glue the broken cup of their marriage back together. They went to see Dr. Bernstein twice a week, tried to do everything she recommended, talk more, spend time together, notice the little joys. Alice returned to their bedroom, but Garrett often woke up in the middle of the night and went to sleep on the couch in the living room. The four of them spent Christmas together, trying to create a festive atmosphere for the children. They decorated the tree, baked gingerbread, and exchanged gifts. From the outside, everything seemed almost normal. Lily even said tonight, "I'm so glad you two aren't fighting anymore." Garrett and Alice only exchanged sad smiles. They weren't fighting, it was true. But they weren't really living. They just existed side by side like two tired actors playing the roles of husband and wife. On the last day of the old year, when the children were asleep, preparing to spend the holiday at their grandmother's house, Garrett and Alice sat in the kitchen with glasses of champagne. The clock read 11:30. "We have to decide," Alice said quietly, looking at the bubbles in her glass. "We can't go on like this. It's not fair to the children or to ourselves." Garrett nodded. He was looking forward to this conversation and dreading it at the same time. "I tried, Alice," he said. "I swear I've tried." "I know," she smiled weakly. "We both tried. But sometimes it just isn't enough, is it?" Bitterness settled on her tongue, not from the champagne, from the realization of the inevitable. "I still see it," Garrett admitted. "Every time we're around each other, every time we try to be close, I see you with him, and it kills me inside." Alice lowered her head. Tears dripped into the glass, creating circles on the surface of the golden liquid. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. "All these years, everything we had." "No," Garrett shook his head. "Not everything. Lily and Connor are the best thing we've made together. And we've had good times, Alice. Lots of good times." She raised flushed eyes to him. "What are we going to do, Garrett?" He took a deep breath. The decision that had been brewing in him for weeks was finally coming into words. "I think we should split up," he said quietly. "Don't torture each other and the children with this travesty of a family." Alice nodded. There was a mixture of pain and relief in her gaze. How are we going to tell the children? Together, Garrett answered. Explain that we love them and will always be there for them. That it wasn't their fault. That some things just break. They do, Alice echoed. Yeah, I guess they do. They finished their champagne in silence. Outside the window, the first firecrackers were going off. The neighborhood kids couldn't wait until midnight. A new year, a new life. One for Garrett, one for Alice. The following weeks became an agonizing process of separating lives that had been shared for 15 years. The first thing they told the children, sitting together on the living room couch, holding hands to show unity in this decision. Mom and I love you very much, Garrett began, choosing his words, and we always will, no matter what happens. Are you getting a divorce? Lily asked bluntly. At 13, she understood everything. Garrett and Alice looked at each other. Yes, sweetheart, Alice said softly. We've tried to make things right, but sometimes it's better for adults to live apart. Because you slept in the guest room? Connor asked. Because of your back? Alice bit her lip, holding back tears. It's not about your back, buddy, Garrett said. It's just that Mom and I had some problems we couldn't work out. Don't you love each other anymore? Lily looked at her mother and father with a piercing stare. We do, Alice said. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people need to go their separate ways. I don't want you to break up. Connor wiped away the tears that had come to his fist. We're a family. And we'll stay that way. Garrett hugged his son. We'll just live in different houses. But we'll always be your parents. Always be there for you. Lily was silent, staring at the floor. Then she stood up and without a word went to her room. Alice wanted to follow her, but Garrett stopped her. Give her time. This is hard to take. In the evening he found his daughter on the porch looking up at the stars. May I? He asked, pointing to a seat nearby. Lily shrugged. Not consent, but not a refusal either. Garrett sat down, feeling the old plank of the step creak. All my friends have divorced parents, Lily said suddenly. I thought we were different. We tried, Garrett replied quietly. We tried hard. Was it because of another man? His daughter's question caught him off guard. Emma said her parents divorced because her mom had another man. Garrett took a deep breath. True or false? What's best for the baby? It's complicated, Lily, he finally said. Mom and I have had our problems and we've both made mistakes. But they're our mistakes, not yours. Where are you going to live? I found an apartment not far from here. It's only a 10-minute walk. You and Connor can come over anytime. Lily nodded, still not looking at her father. I hate it, she said. I hate that things are changing. Me too, sweetheart. Garrett put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Me too. Finding a place to live was harder than he'd anticipated. Riverdale was a small town and there weren't many apartments available. They needed something inexpensive to pay for the house where Alice and the children would stay, and for a new place to live. In the end, Garrett found a small one-bedroom apartment in a high-rise on Oak Street, not the most prestigious neighborhood, but clean and safe. It overlooked the park where they had once walked with little Lily. The division of property had become a strange inventory of their 15 years together. Who would get the coffee maker and the family photo albums? Who gets the old couch bought before the kids were born? Each thing held a memory. Each could cause an argument. Take what you need, Alice finally said. Let the furniture stay here. It would be more familiar to the children. Garrett agreed, though he didn't like the prospect of furnishing a new apartment from scratch. But she was right. The kids were going through too much change as it was. Ray and the other co-workers helped with the move. They loaded boxes of stuff into the pickup truck, unloaded it at the new place, tried to make jokes to lighten the mood. No one asked why. Rumors spread fast in a small town, and everyone already knew about Alice's cheating. Garrett was uncomfortable with the pitying looks, but he appreciated their support. The hardest part was talking to his friends. Or rather, the married couples they'd been talking to for years. Now these people didn't know how to behave. Should they invite both of them? Or just one? And if one, which one? Stop socializing altogether. Awkward meetings in the supermarket, strained smiles, promises to get together sometime that no one was going to fulfill. Parents reacted differently too. Alice's mother blamed Garrett for everything, not paying attention, always cold. His own mother, who lives in Florida, flew down for a week to support her son and tried to talk to Alice, to no avail. Garrett's father died 5 years ago, and Alice's father simply removed himself from the problem, as he had always done. The hardest part was resolving the issue with the children. After much discussion, consultation with Dr. Bernstein, and an argument that almost turned into a real scandal, they came to an agreement on joint custody. The children would live mostly with Alice in the family home, but spend every weekend with Garrett, plus 1 weekday a week, usually Wednesday when Alice has a late-night job. Vacations and vacations are separate schedules. "Do you think we can make it work?" Alice asked as they signed the papers at the lawyer's office. "Being good parents, but apart?" "We'll have to try," Garrett answered. For their sake. Financial matters were even more complicated. They had bought the house jointly, and now Garrett had to either buy out Alice's share, which he couldn't afford, or keep paying half the mortgage on a house he no longer lived in. They decided that they would leave things as they were for the time being. Garrett would continue to make his part of the payment, and Alice would pay the full utilities and maintenance on the house. "When the kids are grown, we can sell the house and split the money," Alice suggested. Garrett nodded, though the very thought of their family nest egg becoming a mere asset for sale was painful. By March, all the formalities were settled. Garrett had settled into his new apartment, bought some inexpensive furniture, hung a few pictures of the children on the walls, arranged the books. The place didn't feel much like home, more like a hotel room, a temporary home. But he had to get used to it. The children's first visit had been awkward. They looked around the rooms with undisguised disappointment. Lily noticed that there was almost no food in the refrigerator. Connor asked if he could bring his bike here. Garrett tried not to show how hard it was for him to see their confusion. "It'll be better next time," he promised. "I'll buy the foods you like and the games. Maybe even a bigger TV for video games." By the third visit, things did get a little easier. They found a rhythm, ordering pizza, playing board games, watching movies. Lily had stopped asking every time if they could all live together again. Connor got used to leaving his toys in Daddy's room, as he called the space allotted to him. Things had normalized at work, too. Colleagues stopped throwing sympathetic glances. Clients didn't notice the change. Garrett was completely immersed in repairing cars. It helped not to think about the ruined personal life. One evening, while the children were visiting him, the phone rang. It was Alice. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I just wanted to make sure everything was all right." "It's fine," Garrett replied, watching Connor and Lily playing a video game. "We ordered Chinese food and are getting ready for the movie marathon." "Good," Alice sounded relieved. "Did Connor bring his allergy medicine with him?" "Yeah, I made sure of that." There was an awkward pause. Their conversations had flowed freely before, but now they were struggling to get every word out. "How are you?" Alice finally asked. Garrett hesitated. "How is he?" "Lonely. Still angry. Still resentful. But not as acute as before." "It's okay," he answered. "I'm getting used to it." "Me too," she said quietly. "Garrett, I want you to know. I've applied for a transfer to Cleveland." He felt his insides tighten. "Cleveland? That's 3 hours away." "I know," she sounded guilty. "But it's a branch of our company and I've been offered a promotion. It's a good opportunity. I need a fresh start." "And the kids?" was all he could ask. I was thinking about having them stay with you in the house. That way they don't have to change schools, say goodbye to friends. I'll come up on weekends and they can stay with me during the vacations." Garrett didn't know what to say. On the one hand, he wanted the children to live with him. On the other hand, could he give them the same care and attention as Alice? He worked all day, sometimes late. And most importantly, did Alice deserve the punishment of being separated from the children? "Let's talk about this later," he finally said, "when the kids aren't around." "Sure," she agreed quickly. "Thank you, Garrett." After the call, he stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring out the window. Cleveland. Alice would leave, start a new life. Maybe she'll meet someone else. And he would stay here, in a city where every corner reminded him of her. "Dad, are you coming?" Lily peeked into the kitchen. "We've picked out a movie." "Of course I'm coming." He smiled, trying to hide his anxiety. They sat on the couch, Garrett in the center, the kids on the sides. Some fantastic story was unfolding on the screen, but he couldn't concentrate. Instead, he watched his children, almost teenage Lily, with the serious eyes he'd inherited from his mother, and cheerful Connor, so much like himself as a child. No matter what happens between him and Alice, those two are the best thing he has. And for their sake, he's willing to go through all this difficulty, all this pain. On Friday, driving the children back to Alice's house, he finally decided to talk. "I've been thinking about your offer," he said when they were alone on the porch. "About Cleveland." Alice stared at him tensely, preparing for rejection. "If you really want this transfer, I'll support it," Garrett said. "And yes, the children can stay with me. But there's a condition. I'll move back into the house. They need stability, not wandering between the apartment and the house." "Of course," Alice agreed quickly. "I wouldn't have imagined it any other way. This is your home, Garrett. My former home." The word former hung between them, confirming the status of their relationship. "Thank you," Alice said quietly. "It means a lot to me." "It's not for you," Garrett shook his head. "It's for the children. And for me. I need to move on, Alice. And to do that, I need to stop clinging to the past." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. In that moment, looking at the woman he'd spent most of his life with, Garrett felt for the first time that he could forgive not for her sake, but for his own. To move on with his life, to not carry this weight in his heart forever. "When do you plan to move?" he asked. "Early June, if the transfer is approved," Alice answered, wiping away her tears. "The children will finish the school year and then we'll all start a new chapter," Garrett finished for her. A new chapter. Not the one he'd envisioned when he'd put the ring on Alice's finger 15 years ago, but maybe the one he needed now. Spring rains were replaced by summer heat, then fall winds, followed by winter, and spring again. The year flew by, filled with new worries and habits. Garrett had returned to the family home when Alice had moved to Cleveland, newly settling into the space they'd once shared. It felt strange, sleeping in the bedroom where the two of them used to fall asleep together, cooking in the kitchen where Alice used to be. For the first few weeks after she'd left, Lily and Connor had been quiet, as if afraid of upsetting the delicate balance of their new life. Garrett tried to keep the routine they were accustomed to, the same breakfasts, the same family dinners, the same weekend activities. Gradually, they got used to it. Lily took over some of the household chores, helping with the cooking and cleaning without being asked. Connor still forgot to clean up his toys, but he took out the trash like a grown man in the house, Garrett joked. Alice came every other weekend and stayed in the guest room, which was now officially Mom's. It had been awkward at first. Garrett didn't know how to behave, feeling like a host hosting a guest or an intruder in her time with the kids. But gradually, they had developed a certain ritual. Alice would arrive on Friday nights. She and Garrett would exchange brief updates on the kids, and then he would leave to go to Ray's house or just go to the garage to work on another project, leaving his ex-wife alone with Lily and Connor. On weekdays, they chatted on the phone, short calls about school progress, health, holiday plans. Conversations were polite, restrained, without excessive emotion. Sometimes Garrett found himself thinking that he and Alice were almost strangers, and in a strange way, it didn't hurt him as much as before. On weekdays, Garrett's life followed a strict schedule. Wake up at 6:30, breakfast, get the kids ready for school, drive to work. In the evening, dinner, homework, and rare moments of relaxation in front of the TV or with a book. Lily went dancing on Tuesdays and Connor went swimming on Thursdays. Weekends were filled with shopping, laundry, cleaning, and of course, entertainment for the children, movies, picnics, bowling. In her new life in Cleveland, Alice seemed to have found a balance too. Her transfer turned out to be a real promotion. Now, she was the head of the financial planning department, had her own office and secretary. She rented a small but cozy apartment in a modern neighborhood overlooking Lake Erie. On the phone, she told her children about the city's attractions, about new friends, about concerts and exhibitions. Garrett listened to these conversations with an ear to the ground, feeling a strange mixture of feelings, joy for her success, and a slight sadness at the thought that their paths were irrevocably parted. Alice came for 3 days for Thanksgiving. They had decided to spend the holiday together for the sake of the children, they both repeated, though in truth it was more for their own sake, to prove that they were capable of being civilized adults. "I could stay at a hotel," Alice suggested over the phone a week before they arrived. "Mine come." "Don't be silly," Garrett replied. "Your room is free. The children would be happy to have you spend more time with them." During the dinner, watching Lily and Connor tell their mother's school stories, Garrett felt something like peace for the first time in a long time. They weren't family anymore, not in the former sense, but something binds them together still, something deeper than just shared children or a shared past. "How are you coping with all this?" Alice asked late at night when the children were asleep and they were sitting in the kitchen with cups of tea. "The house, the work, the kids. It must be difficult." "I'm getting used to it," Garrett shrugged. "I have good helpers." He nodded toward the children's rooms. "How about you? How's Cleveland? Any regrets about moving?" "No," Alice shook her head. "I needed the change. New city, new job, new people, a chance for a fresh start." "Good for you," Garrett said sincerely. And it was true. He no longer felt any anger or resentment toward her, only a slight nostalgia for what might have been. In January, Veronica came into Garrett's life. They met at an auto repair shop when she brought in the old Ford she'd inherited from her father. A short woman with short, dark hair and bright brown eyes, she worked as a veterinarian at the city clinic. She was 2 years younger than Garrett, never married, but, as it turned out later, had been through a serious relationship that ended in a painful breakup. At first it was just talk during car repairs, then a chance encounter at the supermarket, then coffee at a small coffee shop on the corner of Maple Street. Garrett hadn't noticed how he'd come to look forward to those meetings, how he'd come to notice the little things, the smell of her perfume, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was worried, the slight huskiness in her voice after a long day at work. "I'm divorced," he said at once. "I have 2 children living with me." "I know," Veronica smiled. "Riverdale is a small town. Everyone knows everything here." She didn't ask about Alice, about the reasons for the divorce, about how he was coping. She just accepted the situation for what it was. That was one of the qualities that attracted Garrett, her ability to live in the present without digging into the past. Garrett had put off meeting the kids for almost 2 months. He wanted to be sure that his relationship with Veronica was serious, that they had a future. He didn't want to traumatize Lily and Connor, give them false hopes, or, on the contrary, scare them with the prospect of a new mom. "Dad's seeing some woman," Lily said at dinner one night, looking at her father with a slight smile. Garrett almost choked. "What makes you say that?" "You shave on Tuesdays and Thursdays," the daughter replied simply. "And you smell like a different cologne. And you smile more often." "You're very observant," Garrett admitted after a pause. "That's good," Connor said, still eating. "I'm tired of you always being alone." Garrett glanced over at Lily, expecting her to object or take offense, but her daughter only shrugged. "Connor's right. You deserve to be happy, Dad." After that conversation, he decided to introduce Veronica to the children. He invited her to a Sunday barbecue, nothing fancy, just a normal family day out. Lily was a little wary, but polite. Connor was immediately sympathetic, especially when he learned that Veronica treated animals. "Can you see my hamster?" he asked. "There's something wrong with his paw." "Sure," Veronica smiled. "I just need to get some tools from the car." By the end of the day, the ice was broken. Lily and Veronica had discovered a shared interest in photography, Connor staying close to her, asking about different animals. Garrett watched them with quiet joy. His children and a woman he had grown to care for had found common ground. When he told Alice about it during her next visit, she reacted with restraint. "That's good. The children need to see that life goes on." But something flashed in her eyes for a moment. Regret? Jealousy? Garrett couldn't tell, and he didn't want to look into it. "What about you?" he asked cautiously. "Is there someone in your life?" "No," Alice shook her head. "Not yet. I'm focused on work and, well, rebuilding myself. I've been seeing a therapist, looking into what led me to make these mistakes." "What did you find out?" She shrugged. "That I was always looking for outside validation of my worth, that I was afraid to be alone with myself, that I mistook attention for love." Garrett was silent. It was strange to hear such revelations from a woman he'd once known like the back of his hand and now barely recognized. "I'm glad things are working out for you," Alice added. "I really am." In the spring, when the apple trees bloomed, Garrett invited Veronica on a weekend trip, just the two of them, no children. Lily and Connor were supposed to be visiting Alice, and he and Veronica had the opportunity to spend some alone time together. They went to the same cabin in the mountains where Garrett and Alice had once tried to save their marriage, but this time it was different. There was no oppressive tension, no attempts to mend the broken, just two people enjoying each other's company, the silence of the forest and the beauty of the mountain lake. "Are you happy?" Veronica asked the last night they sat on the veranda, looking at the stars. Garrett wondered, was he happy? After all he'd been through, after his family's collapse, after months of pain and anger. "Yes," he answered, and he was surprised at how sincere that answer was. "I'm happy, in a different way than I was before. But yes, I am happy." Veronica smiled and squeezed his hand. At the beginning of the summer, Alice came to pick up the kids for a 2-week vacation. She planned to show them around Cleveland, take them to museums, the lake, maybe even go to an amusement park. "Will you miss Daddy?" she asked as she helped them pack. "Of course," Connor answered. "But Veronica will be with him, so he won't be all alone." Alice froze for a moment, but quickly got over herself. "Does Veronica come here often?" she asked, as if by way of passing the time. "Almost every day," Connor answered with childlike directness. "She and Daddy are like lovebirds, always looking at each other and smiling." "Connor," Lily shouted at her brother, "don't be silly. What's the big deal?" The boy shrugged his shoulders. "Dad's happy and Veronica's cool. She promised to get me a puppy for my birthday." "She did?" Alice raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Did Daddy say yes?" "Not yet," Connor sighed, "but I'll talk him into it." That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Alice lingered in the kitchen. Garrett noticed that she was nervous, going through the things in her bag, fiddling with her phone. Is something wrong? He asked. No, just... She faltered. Connor said that you and Veronica were very close. Yes, Garrett answered simply. We've been dating for 6 months. Is that serious? He looked at his ex-wife carefully. I think so. We're taking it slow, but yes, I hope it's serious. Alice nodded, looking out the window. In the twilight, the garden seemed mysterious, almost fairy tale-like. How many evenings they had spent together looking out at it, planning the future, dreaming of their children growing up here, of growing old together in rocking chairs on the veranda. I'm happy for you, she said at last. I really am. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Garrett said. Alice smiled weakly. I hope someday I'll find my way too. In the meantime, I'm learning to be happy with myself. The next morning, Garrett helped Alice load her things into the car. Lily and Connor hugged their father, promising to call every day and bring back souvenirs from Cleveland. Keep an eye on them, Garrett said when the children were already in the car. Connor's afraid of heights, and Lily's too shy to ask for help. I know, Alice smiled softly. They're my kids too. They stood across from each other, two people who had once been one but now lived separate lives. There were invisible threads between them, shared memories, shared children, shared history. But now each had his own path. Take care of yourself, Garrett said. Take care of yourself, Alice said. Be happy with her. I am. She got in the car and started the engine. The children waved out the window, their faces bright with anticipation. Garrett stood in the driveway until the car disappeared around the corner. Back in the house, he felt an unusual silence, not the oppressive silence of loneliness, but the quiet silence of pause. Veronica was due to arrive in an hour. They were planning dinner, maybe a movie. And then there would be a new day, new worries, new joys. Life went on, different from what it had been before. But still life, with all its ups and downs, sorrows and hopes. At the same time, in the car, already on the highway, Alice furtively wiped away her tears, trying not to let the children notice. She was sincere in wishing Garrett happiness with the new woman. But part of her, the part that held the memories of 15 years together, of having children, of all the joys and sorrows they'd shared, that part shrank painfully at the thought that another woman would now take her place in his life, in their home, perhaps even in the hearts of their children. She didn't regret the decision to leave. It was a necessary step to start over, to give Garrett a chance to forgive and herself a chance to let go of the guilt. But deep down, she knew that a part of her would forever remain in that house with the white picket fence, the apple trees in the orchard, and the creaky steps on the porch. A part of her would always belong to that life, that family, that happiness she had destroyed with her own hands. "Mom, look, deer!" Connor exclaimed, pointing to the side of the road where two graceful animals grazed. Alice smiled, wiping away the last tear. The past would remain the past. And ahead was the future she would build day by day, decision by decision, choice by choice. And maybe one day she would find her happiness too. A different happiness, different from the past, but happiness nonetheless. "I see, sweetheart," she replied to her son. "They're beautiful,